The video games industry likes to lie about games, but games also like to lie about games. RNG is a term most game hobbyists have encountered, randomly or not, at some point, and may very well be one of the most deceptive parts of games. RNG, or random number generator if YouTube is showing videos about video games to people who don't know what video games are, is exactly what it sounds like. Random numbers being generated to display certain outcomes tied to that number, most comparable to dice in a board game, or more specifically, role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, since many video games were conceptualized around such tabletop games.
I don't have the support of my parents anymore.
Okay, if you roll a 3, you turn on the light switch. If you roll a 2, you don't turn on the light switch. And if you roll a 1, I will short out your breaker box in real life and cause an actual house fire. But the manual says house fires aren't allowed when there are more than 3 people playing. Doesn't matter, I'm chaotic neutral. Though most commonly associated with RPGs, RNG has a place in nearly any game that makes use of choice. Even deciding if your gunshot will hit a target, meaning you can now blame RNG for losing team deathmatch instead of your team, and sound even more insane than usual. Actually, I'd rather blame my team, it's more fun. RNG ran down to the first game, Doom. That's a funny way to spell Doom. Pong's use of RNG is probably the only thing that made the game any fun. Deciding the angle the ball would bounce off a paddle using some number generated in the code upon the event. Otherwise you would just have a pixel moving horizontally back and forth. I'm sure some philosopher will find meaning in that. Pong is quite close to pure RNG, but it would quickly become clear to game developers that a majority of people did not score very well in the SAT math section. Most people are terrible with predicting values. The theoretical probability of an event occurring is equal to the number of possibilities for that event divided by the total number of possible outcomes. And so you would think in a game like Tetris where there are 7 pieces, there's a 1 in 7 chance you'll get a certain block, but that's not the case. People tend to see that 1 in 7 theoretical probability coinciding with probability models, which describe chance behavior by listing possible outcomes in what is known as a sample space, and believe that a given piece will show up after cycling through about 6 pieces, when in actuality true randomness would have it so that each piece is a separate event, meaning that you have a 1 in 7 chance to get a certain piece each time, which can lead to you getting like 9 squares in a row or not getting a Z for 12 cycles, even if it is unlikely. Even though the law of large numbers would have the experimental and theoretical probability match up eventually, it's not quite so in moment-to-moment gameplay. Terrible for a game like Tetris where a feeling of randomness is integral to the enjoyment and to a certain degree skill derived from play sessions. Because of this, programmers have to find ways to make events appear random in the manner humans perceive, rather than being truly random, with concepts such as sandbagging and pity timers. Why is mental health care for gamers not free yet? Things get especially bad when you start to consider event combinations. Let's say you're playing Terraria. Look, I've played other games, this example just works. And you want to kill a lunar cultist, since the ones in real life threatened you or something, to get either the trophy or a mask. You have a 10% chance to get the trophy when you kill it, and a 14.29 chance of getting the mask is. Most people think that the probability of one item or the other dropping is whatever the sum of the 2 probabilities is. Put it on screen editor, I'm too lazy. I'm his editor. And who do I think I am to me? This probability, though, is wrong considering these events are not mutually exclusive, as both items can be dropped at the same time, meaning that after you add the probabilities for both, you have to subtract the probability of both happening at the same time. In this case, this to get this. If the events are exclusive, however, adding them does work. Conditional probabilities are an extension of this, that being the probability of an event happening given another event. To better understand this, let's do a tree diagram. Actually, let's just call it a pathway diagram. Trees get too much publicity. Oh, you get to look nice during the autumn. Well, let's see how you cope when all that color is whisked away by the harsh reality of winter. You're playing the latest installment of the turn-based RPG Pokemon. You see, this video will stay timeless because Pokemon will never end. Because you don't value your time or have any sense of self-respect.
You'd definitely get beaten up if you're using this in school.
The creature on the other side has a 32% chance to critical hit, and you have a 23% chance of landing a hit on your turn if this happens, and a 76% chance of landing a hit when it doesn't. You can fill out the rest of the pathway chart by taking the complement of each stated probability, which is the likelihood a given event does not occur, by subtracting from 1 in this case. I feel like mathematicians just come up with these terms to validate their field. Goddamn Lagrange error bound. You can't just make up words. Error. To calculate the conditional probability of a critical hit happening given you landing a hit, you find the probability of both events happening, which you get by multiplying the 2 probabilities together since they're independent, and dividing that by the probability of getting a hit, which is actually not only the probability of this hit, which you may have thought because, well, I don't know you personally enough to come up with an insult for you, but also the probability of the hit of the probability for the other outcome. This makes more sense visually than spoken, and with that, this is the probability of the conditional. I'm aware that the example of conditional probability has more to do with player choice, but that is totally on purpose and not because I couldn't come up with ideas for in-game examples considering a majority of the games I play have most events as mutually exclusive and as such would not have them touch on the subject matter I wished in a desired fashion. at all. It's also because probability in a player's input still has a great amount of impact, or to a certain degree, lack of impact. This is considering that a player always wants their decision to be translated into the game world. Where RNG comes in is deciding whether or not this ends up happening, with there nearly always being potential for a player's actions amounting to nothing, which, while frustrating, can be necessary in some games wherein always being able to get the desired result leads to a great amount of boredom. And art then comes from balancing this tension of input probability, so as to ensure both a lessening of enragement and a keeping of engagement. I came up with that on the spot. But you still have the option to go all in on the frustration and market to people who still miss 2012 YouTube Let's Plays. The balance of both input and output randomness matter when you want to make a fair or unfair playing experience. Oh wait, no they don't, because computers can't even actually make random numbers. Everything is based on a seed, which is a string of numbers that determine the outcome of random number generation and are often made using in-game or even system occurrences, ranging anywhere from player position to the time. And even though the seeds are updated all the time, you can still generate the same seed with the right conditions, leading speedrunners and other individuals likely fueled by some form of psychosis medication, spending hours getting every element necessary just right so that they can start their run of a game perfectly before inevitably failing, because that's what a lot of speedrunning is. Even so, to the average individual, RNG is very important, as a bad RNG system just ruins player experience, even though the people who want to find the perfect seed will just ruin it for themselves. Actually, I've been thinking, if randomness is so important for engagement, maybe I should put it into my comedy. You'll never know what I say next, you'll be so surprised you have to laugh. I can't believe nobody has thought of this before. Okay, here goes. Why are those googly eyes on my steak? I had to think about that, and then type it out, and then actively say it. Well, I guess I'll just protest to be a case study outside the local clinic. See ya.
She's got PTSD or whatever, post-traumatic Down syndrome.